Hello and welcome to Business on the Wire. While unemployment numbers have been ticking up over the last couple of quarters, disturbing new data has now emerged on the state of India's poor and how shocking that figure now looks. A new study by Professor Santosh Mehrotra and his colleague Jajati Keshari Parida points to the fact that for the first time in India's history, there's actually been a sharp uptick in the number of people that are living below the poverty line. Remember, there's two other shocking factors to that. One, that this is data that was released till the point that COVID hit. So this is a situation that was actually building up even before a pandemic hit our country. And two, the fact that there has been a staggering increase of 76 million people slipping below the poverty line. All this in the span of just 8 years. What were the pressure points? Why has it gotten so bad? And what is it pointing to? Joining me now to talk about the details of his findings is Professor Santosh Mehrotra. Thank you, Professor Mehrotra, for joining me and speaking with me. We're going to really unpack this data that you found around poverty and what it's pointing to. But first, I want to start with setting out the lines of reference. What is the data that we are referring to through the course of this conversation that is pointing to the outcomes that it is?
So, the National Sample Survey Organization of the Ministry of Statistics of India conducts a consumption expenditure survey every 5 years.
Yeah.
And our last one was done in 2017-18, a full 6 years after the previous one in 2011-12. Unfortunately, the government did not release the 17-18 data. However, it did get leaked some of that data in newspapers.
Yeah.
But what I've done is actually rely upon the same National Sample Survey Organization survey of what is called the Labor Force Survey, which is the periodic labor force survey, which has been coming out annually since 2017-18. So we have now 3 rounds. And what I've done is to analyze consumption expenditure data, which has been reported in the PLFS and in the previous labor force surveys as well, from the beginning of this decade, the previous decade, all the way till 2020.
Yeah.
So I've used that data to estimate poverty by a consistent poverty line. And this consistent poverty line is the official Planning Commission poverty line, because ever since this government came to power, it has never estimated poverty because it has, as I said, released the consumption expenditure survey. So what I've done, you have to appreciate that a lot of work went into analyzing this, because of course we went into the unit level data of households. And the labor force survey does collect consumption expenditure for each household, for every unit, although it doesn't ask as many detailed questions as the standard once in 5 year consumption expenditure survey. Bottom line, what we've got is comparable estimates for what has happened to poverty between 2011-12 and 2019-20.
Yeah.
And that has shown that the absolute number of poor has grown in our country by 7.6 crores or 76 million, which is a first for India, for the first time in India's poverty estimation history since 1973 by a consistent poverty line, the official poverty line. The absolute number of poor has grown.
Yeah.
Always until 2012, the incidence of poverty was falling and the absolute number of poor had at least remained constant, because the population is growing and you know that poor have slightly more children. So the absolute number of poor never grew until 2004.
Yeah.
But the most important finding is that between 2004-5 and 11-12, when our growth rate was the highest in the history of our country, 8% average between 2004-5 and 13-14,
yeah,
we managed to reduce the absolute number of the poor, not just the share of population which is poor, and we pulled up 140 million people above the poverty line.
Yeah.
14 crores those above the poverty line.
I want to ask you to pause there, because there's, a lot of important points that you've touched on, and I want to get into them separately. The first, the fact being, and you can walk us through this specific data first, Professor, which is that 76 million people in India have slipped into poverty, and this has happened in the period of just 8 years. I mean, that's an incredibly large spike to have happened in the period of 8 years. What is it that you saw happening through this period of the last 8 years? Because we are actually moving till pre-COVID. We haven't even counted the situation after, which we'll get to in a bit. But in 8 years, we've seen a surge of people slipping below the poverty line. What happened?
Well, I think we know what happened. Because as I said in my earlier intervention, the growth rate of the economy was at a historic high for a 10-year period until 14. While it had slowed post 2008, but it picked up again. That's how you averaged 8%. And that trajectory was maintained barely for a year, because very soon after this government came to power, demonetization hit the economy, which undermined the livelihoods of the majority of the population who are in the unorganized sector. And the growth rate of the economy began to slow. So the average in the last 7 years until 1920, I'm saying, 1920, because my data only brings us up to 1920, the middle of 20. We'll talk about after 20 later. We know that the growth rate had been slowing consistently for 9 quarters prior to COVID hitting.
Yeah.
And this decline in the growth rate, combined with 2 other factors, which I hope we'll discuss later, has resulted in this increase in the poor. The other 2 factors are a phenomenal increase in joblessness.
Yeah.
And thirdly, as a result of the unprecedented increase in joblessness, fall in wages. So when wages and earnings fall, it shows up in consumption expenditure, and we estimate poverty by consumption expenditure. So that's in sum the explanation for what has happened.
I want to jump forward a little bit, Professor, to the here and now, because a lot of people disregard what we've seen happen to the trend of the GDP, which is literally that it, fell, as you said, quarter after quarter, and is now making a slow recovery, albeit having collapsed to, a double-digit negative figure. This is the intrinsic link between why it's important to have a stronger GDP versus the impact that's happening on the larger population, is it not? It's not so simplistic as to say we'll get to a particular point. It's that this damage in the GDP figure has actually taken a swath of people crashing below the poverty line.
You're absolutely right. So let me explain what were the deeper forces which were driving down poverty prior to 2014.
Yeah.
And I've already mentioned, which is the very rapid growth. But with rapid growth, unprecedented growth, we got non-farm jobs growing at an unprecedented pace. You see, non-farm jobs were growing from about 2000 to 2012 at the rate of 7.5 million new jobs per annum. 7.5 million new jobs in the non-farm sector, services and industry, including construction, every year, when only about 2 million people were joining the labor force, especially after 2004-5, because millions of young had actually gone into school and remained in school, so fewer were joining the labor force. Now, as people got better and better educated, they would start entering the labor force. I'll come to that in a minute, but let me first explain how we got this, unprecedented decline in the absolute number of the poor. Because earlier I said the share of the population below the poverty line had always been falling.
Yeah.
The absolute number had never fallen until 2004-5, and a reason for that was that the population of the poor tends to increase a little faster. Now, the population started growing less, but more importantly, we were now generating many more non-farm jobs, as a result of which millions left agriculture to join the non-farm sector for the first time in India's post-independence history, post-2004-5. Would you believe it? Between 2004-5 and 11-12, about 37 million people left agriculture. Now, the share of people working in agriculture had always been falling until 4-5. The absolute number had never fallen. The absolute number always increased. Now, the result of absolute number in agriculture increasing is that rural distress was increasing.
Yeah.
But for them to leave agriculture, non-farm jobs had to be growing, and they started growing after 2004-5 at this phenomenal pace of 7.5 million per annum. However, post 12, this creation of non-farm jobs came down to 29 million per annum from 7.5 million per annum to 2.9 million per annum, 29 lakhs versus 75 lakhs. You understand how dramatic is the fall in non-farm jobs post 2012 because of the growth rate slowing and because of the pattern of growth. And because in the previous period, the non-farm jobs were growing very rapidly, real wages rose very sharply.
Yeah.
Because real wages were rising, therefore consumption expenditure rose. And that's why you get the phenomenon of 140 million people rising above the poverty line every year between 4-5 and 11-12. That's 20 million people rising above the poverty line. That's an unprecedented achievement in India's history, and it's staggering because it's almost of Chinese proportions. On the contrary, you get in all three variables post 2012 a decline in growth rate, a decline in the non-farm jobs growth, and in wages. That's the summary of the story.
The sharp trend that you're observing post 2012 also comes with political change that happened around the same period, Professor Mehrotra. You mentioned demonetization. Does that seem to have been, the turning point for this fall in numbers? By fall, I mean that, more people slipping below the poverty line, or have you been able to identify other pain points where this pressure started?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Because I've been able to identify the earlier points also. You see, I managed to sort of get access to Labour Bureau data for 15-16, and it was showing by 15-16 already some increase in the unemployment trend, which had been, you see, the unemployment was only 2.2% in 11-12. By 15-16, it was 3.4%. But then by 17-18, it jumps to 6.1%. Now, in our country where informality is as high as it is, this tripling from 2.2% unemployment to 6.1% in a matter of literally 5 to 6 years was unprecedented. And as all of you will remember, newspapers were had screeching headlines saying 17-18 unemployment is the highest in 45 years, ever since labor force surveys began in 1973. So, and that trend has not fallen post 17-18, which is what we record, because the periodic labor force survey of the NSO for 1920 tells you that by the current weekly status, there is no change in the unemployment rate between 17-18 and now. If anything, we could talk about it, distress has increased on multiple dimensions.
Yeah.
Let me pause there.
You've also pointed out the fact that the stress is obviously very acute in rural India. Let me ask you, a two-part question. One, what was your observation on trends in urban India, where urban poor have been hit very hard, including on employment, as you lined out? And secondly, what kind of spread are you seeing, Professor, in terms of states that have been hit harder than the others?
Right. Okay, so let me tell you about the distinction between rural and urban areas, and I'll say a little bit more, and I will relate it to employment again. You see, my estimate is that in the year 2011-12, the number of rural poor was 216.7 million. So let's round it off to 217 million. And that increased phenomenally to 283 million. That's a remarkable increase, actually, because we are talking about an increase of nearly sort of, well, how much is that? 2063, we are talking about 66 odd million increase in rural areas. So in other words, of the 76 million, the 66 million is coming, increase in rural poor is coming from rural areas. Only the remaining sort of 10 or 12 million is coming from urban areas. This is not that surprising. One, please appreciate that, plot sizes in rural areas have been shrinking for a long time. And in the last 7 years or so, the MSP has not risen very much. And that was driving rural distress even further. And because urban jobs were not growing, I've already mentioned those numbers. We got only 29 million, 2.9 million jobs per annum, as opposed to 7.5 million jobs per annum earlier. 2.9 million jobs being created post 2012 every year. So most of those non-farm jobs are in urban areas. And people don't want to be in agriculture. They want to leave agriculture because wages are low. There's too much surplus labor already. Yeah. This is a phenomenon which we've seen for 15 years, that people are leaving agriculture in their millions. But because construction slowed down in the last 5 or 6 years, particularly construction job growth really seriously slowed down. We have the numbers from the NSO's PLFS, which is strongly saying this. So much about the rural and urban. On the states, I'm sorry to say, I have so far, because it's hard work, I've not managed to sort of disaggregate this by state yet. I will come to it at a slightly later stage. But let me give a little bit more richness to the jobs analysis to give you a feel why this consumption expenditure drop is happening and poverty increase is happening. We are a very youthful country. Half of our population is below the age of 26. 2/3 is supposed to be below the age of 35. Now, those who are entering the labor force are obviously young. We define those as between 15 and 29. Now, notice what happened to open unemployment between 2012 and 18-19. I have the numbers here in front of me. And amazingly, and I'll share with you what happened by level of education. So for those who had secondary education, open unemployment youth in 2012 was 4%. It quadrupled to 16% in 18-19. 16. That's those with secondary.
Yeah.
Then those with higher secondary, it more than tripled from 7 to 22. Those who are graduates, it went from 20% to 38%. For those who are postgraduates, it went from 19.5 to 43%. for those with technical training, meaning engineers and such like, went from 19 to 38.6. These are doubling and tripling of unemployment rates, because young people obviously don't want to be in farming.
Yeah.
They've gotten educated. Why are they getting educated? Because they want non-farm jobs, but the jobs are not happening because the economy is slowing down, and the government is simply ignoring these trends. Because initially, you will recall that even PLFS 2017-18, the labor force survey which was carried out, they didn't release the data until after the May election results to the Lok Sabha. They had gotten, they'd already been sort of leaked before that, but they didn't release them.
Yeah.
And the situation was catastrophic. Clearly, all this is prior to the pandemic.
I am going to ask you to extrapolate here, Professor, but what do you think might have happened post-pandemic, both on the numbers and given what also happened post-pandemic with inflation and its trajectory?
Right. So, since we don't have comparable NSO data, I've attempted to do this using CMIE data.
Okay.
I don't think this is a sufficiently robust exercise, but nevertheless, there's incontrovertible evidence that there is a uptick in the numbers of the poor, defined in the same way, in 2021. We know that.
Yeah.
Hardly surprising, because joblessness, which was already high in 2019, far from falling, actually increased very sharply in 2020, and it improved in 2021 as the economy recovered. But what we do know is the following, and this is fairly robust data on the jobs, is fairly robust data, which tells us the following: that if you draw a line for 2019 using CMI data for employment, those employed, then along with that draw a line for 2020 and then for 2021, what you find is, of course, employment in 2020 improved over 2019, but in 2021, it again improved over 2020. But the point is, in 2020, it was sort of obviously below 2019.
Yeah.
And while in 2021, it improved over 2020, it's still below 2019, which was the worst in half a century. So I'm saying, even now, with recovery, which is being tom-tommed to us every day, the employment rate is still below what we had experienced in 2019. In other words, we are very far from full recovery.
Yeah.
Point one. Point two, even when we have data for the full financial year of 21-22 of GDP, we know that while we would have rebounded, the GDP might just only go back to 2019-20 levels. In other words, at the end of financial year 21-22, we will barely be back at a GDP level of 19-20. But the per capita income will be lower because population has grown every year by 1%. And those at the bottom of the pyramid have lost more jobs. Those in the formal sector, the organized sector, have lost fewer jobs. Listed companies are doing extremely well.
Yeah.
Their profits were the highest, as you probably know, this past financial year in the last 7 years, which is one of the reasons why the Nifty and Sensex is booming. But the vast majority have seen a compression in jobs and therefore incomes. And people who had regular work. So what we do know is that those who had regular work fell out of regular work and went into self-employment. Now, self-employment earnings are usually lower because you don't know when your next customer is going to come and what he will pay you. This is one set of problems. The other set of problems, which we've not touched upon, is the massive reverse migration that took place in 2020 and 2021 when millions went back to the rural areas. So already there was excess supply of workers in agriculture. And then you get millions coming back. I was stunned when I analyzed the NSO's data for the numbers in agriculture.
Hmm.
In 2019-20, the absolute number of workers in agriculture was 200 million. It had jumped in 1 year to 232 million. And this is just up to June of 2020. In other words, we are saying that in a matter of a year, 32 million new workers were added to agriculture, which is suggesting that we completely reversed the migration that had taken place out of agriculture from 2004-5 to 11-12. When I said 37 million people left agriculture. Mm-hmm. Now we've added in the matter of 1 year. And we haven't even taken into account here the reverse migration which takes place in 21.
Yeah.
So the deep distress is just catastrophic, Mithali. It is catastrophic, particularly in rural areas. It's not for nothing that a farmer's agitation is happening.
Yeah. You know, a few weeks back, Professor, the Global Hunger Index findings were released. India had slipped to 101st position behind some of our neighbors. And the Ministry of Women and Child Development said it was shocking to read that report. It was devoid of ground reality and facts. There were methodological issues. Given what your data has found, though, in terms of the number of people that have slipped below poverty, the number that, as you said, have increased into the fold of unemployment and are now struggling to find work, would you say that this fits in, what we are seeing on the Global Hunger Index versus what you've seen on poverty?
It fits in totally, Mithali. It fits in totally. Let me explain how. The Global Hunger Index is estimated on the basis of 3 sets of variables. One is calorie intake of adults. Now you can see that calorie intake of adults is going to be impacted adversely when joblessness is increasing and incomes are falling.
Yeah.
That's 1/3 of the weight of the Global Hunger Index. Another third of the weight comes from child wasting and child stunting. Now, child stunting doesn't change from year to year, but wasting does. What is wasting? Wasting is dublapan, thinness, as opposed to stunting, which is natapan, or
growth,
you're taller. You're not as tall as you should be by the reference population. So, in other words, waste likely to have been impacted adversely. And I think we already had evidence of this, Mithali, from the National Family Health Survey of 2019-20. And that would have worsened most recently. Please remember that National Family Health Survey was done in 15-16, done in 19-20. Not all states have been covered, but for the 22 states for which we know data, wasting was not doing better.
Yeah.
And finally, the third component of the Global Hunger Index is child mortality. And child mortality may not have changed. It may not have improved, but it may not have changed. But the other two variables, what shocked me, and I think this is very notable, which you didn't mention, that the Ministry of Women and Child Development in the Government of India actually claimed that the methodology was wrong because the FAO had used Gallup poll surveys of perception. What a shocker that was. Never in the history of any international agency doing surveys of this kind has a Gallup poll of perception been done. I'm sorry to say that the Government of India embarrassed itself in the eyes of the world by making this claim. I have not seen a retraction of that since then. And this is very unfortunate because there is enough evidence to suggest that the GHI should have fallen. And I think the final bit of evidence is the fact that demand for Manrega work in rural areas has been historically high in the most recent past since COVID broke.
Yeah. And that Manrega spend looks like it's almost getting exhausted, as recent reports are indicating, Professor. For a couple of states,
Quite
it's
right.
on hold. The next call will only be taken when the Parliament is again in session. This could, as we speak, be doing more damage to what is already a hemorrhage state of affairs in rural India, is it not?
Indeed. Indeed, I'm looking at a graph right now which shows that in the last 18 months, we know that per month, person days of work has never fallen below 2 crores per month. This is unprecedented. It never used to be like this. In the last 18 months, there are only 3 months in which it has fallen below 2 crores person days of work provided, which means that the demand is massive. And continues to be massive. Why should we be surprised? I told you earlier, people went back to agriculture, went back to their farms. So the result of all this, I should summarize also. The result of all this is that there would be a down, because so many people have gone back. Rural wages would have been depressed even further. There is no work in the lean season. In any case, people would have chosen to work in Manrega, and the meaning of that is Manrega wages are lower than open market wages. Please understand. And open market wages in rural areas have a ratchet effect on urban wages, all of which have been depressed, and we have data for that, which means that we would have seen more poverty in 2021. As I said earlier, I think my estimate is that if 76 million fell below the poverty line, consistent poverty line by June 2020, another 10 to 15 million at least would have fallen again below the poverty line. So we may be close to 90 million poor, more than in 2012.
That's a stunning figure. You know, one final question, Professor. The thing is, we're in uncharted territory now. As you said, for the first time since we've done poverty estimation, indications are that we have a rise in the absolute number of poor. Their wages are falling. Their employment options are falling as well. You know, in your experience of having watched these trend lines, how do you reverse this, and how long does it even take to come back from this cavernous kind of fall in a situation?
I'm sorry to say that the news might not be that good for the following reason. You will recall I said earlier that in financial year 21-22, which is where we are in, our GDP level will only return to 1920 level. Correct. And per capita income will be lower, which means that and so much capacity has been destroyed in the non-farm sector, especially in the unorganized sector, not in the organized sector. We talked about how listed companies within the organized sector are doing. But in the unorganized sector, the MSMEs in particular, they're just dying by the day. I mean, if I was to give you data about All India Manufacturers Association, that surveyed about 80,000 units across the country, they tell you that, you know, they are not being able to pay wages. This was done in July. So all I'm saying is capacity would have been withdrawn. Now it will take 3 to 4 years for these MSMEs new MSMEs to come up, or some of these to revive. Most of the non-farm jobs come from the unorganized sector and MSMEs. We don't expect growth on account of aggregate demand collapsing for the reasons that we've just been discussing. We don't expect growth to be on a consistent basis beyond 2022 higher than 5% per annum. 6% is almost out of the question, and we'll be lucky if we achieve 5% per annum. Our population is still growing at 1% per annum. With that, with 3% per capita income increase over the next 5 years beyond March 22, you do not expect poverty to fall. So we are stuck with millions more poor and millions actually to some extent going hungry for some time to come. How do we get out of this? We needed a much bigger fiscal package. We can still put in place a much bigger fiscal package by the government borrowing more. It is you will be shocked to know that as a proportion of GDP, the 2021 three Atmanirbhar packages, the fiscal dimension was barely 2.2% of GDP. When you compare that to emerging market economies, they put in place 4.7% of GDP. I mean, there's an order of magnitude difference. We just went, all hell after credit supply, liquidity supply. And so our credit stimulus and our monetary policy stimulus is 6 to 7% of GDP compared to what emerging market economies putting in place only 1.9% of GDP. But they did much better on the fiscal stimulus. We need to put in place a fiscal stimulus. We need to have an urban employment guarantee. We need to have a cash transfer program for the poor. We need to put more money into infrastructure investment. We have to put more money into health. Now, I know this government has just initiated a health program. It's too little, too late, because you have to compensate for the state governments which are not being able to undertake the capital expenditure. And please remember, state governments account for 2/3 of all capital expenditure of the public dimension. Private investment is not reviving. Private investment in this financial year was 25% of GDP, which is, sort of what we had 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's, that if you put in place public investment, more public investment by borrowing and through these development financial institutions, you will crowd in private investment, and that will create jobs. Construction creates, millions of new jobs. So that's the requirement. And health, much more investment in health. It's a very labor-intensive activity.
Indeed it is, and it's sombering really, the findings of your study. Thank you for joining in today and walking me through this data. I think if anything, it makes it clearer that the imperative needs to be what we're doing in rural India and what we're spending over there. Otherwise, we're looking at a really scary situation in terms of the poverty numbers. Thank you, Professor Mehrotra, for joining in and speaking with me about this.
Thank you, Ms. Rani.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.